Hello, and welcome to another day of Politics Podcast. You can visit the podcastinternet.org or directly in the podcast@gmail.com. Or you can Facebook podcast on Twitter. This is In U.S. Politics, but so this new part of the podcast. And today, I was going to talk about a few things going on here in the state of Washington, but then I saw a few tweets and the like about what happened apparently Friday night with Sarah Huckabee Sanders and her family. Now, I don't begrudge the business owner of this at all. I totally agree that it's well within her rights to do this, as well as it is Sarah's right to challenge, i.e., make her opinion known about the situation as well. However, I have been seeing a lot of the I've been seeing a lot of tweets and news stories that go back and forth about who's in the right, who's in the wrong, and ultimately, they're both right. Sarah does have the right to go and visit a restaurant of her choosing. However, that restaurant also has the right to refuse her service. Sarah, upon taking the job as the press secretary for the White House, knew that there were going to be some issues with her taking that job at the White House under this presidency. It was her choice to do so and nothing more. She's now got to live with those consequences. If you are paying attention, if you're watching this live on YouTube, you'll notice that I linked a story from the LA Times and I also linked a Twitter account for scientist Melody. And her point in her tweet, and I'll share that here in a bit. Her point in her tweet I found really important, but I also read the story she linked, or her blog post that she linked. I invite you to read that in advance of me going over it, but if you want to read it at your own time as well, that's fine. I just personally think that it should be something that you should consider reading. Now, as I was saying, Sarah Huckabee Sanders has defended this controversial policy of separating children from their parents at the border crossings because the parents have committed an actual crime against the United States. That is, trying to enter as undocumented immigrants, illegal aliens, whatever you want to call them. Was this policy set up by the Trump administration? No. Was it set up by the Obama administration? No. Was it set up by the Bush administration? No. If I remember correctly, it was set up by the Clinton administration. But regardless of who set it up, who started it, it does not matter. It is a BS policy to begin with. But I also understand the reason for the policy. There are people who could be trafficking children into the country illegally just so to cover their illegal activity here in the country as well. So how do we incorporate this? How do we prevent this? Well, honestly, I don't see a way that you can effectively prevent. I don't see a way that you can actually prevent the government from trying to protect us in this manner. Because again, if we can separate these adults from the children, we could find out that those children were taken illegally from their own homes. Not saying that that's 100% the story or the case, but it also is a high probability that this could happen, given the state of affairs in Mexico. Now, it is well within the president's right to make an executive order to challenge this. It is also within their right to defend it as well. It's up to the president and his staff to decide what is going to happen. So, how does this all revolve around being kicked out of a restaurant? Well, at the Red Hen at the Red Hen restaurant in Virginia, the owner politely asked Sarah Huckabee Sanders and her family to leave, and that's well within her right. Now I'm going off of LA Times uh, article. People flock to social media to take sides after Sarah Huckabee Sanders is asked to leave a restaurant by Melissa Ethod. Ethod. Hopefully, I did not butcher that too badly, Melissa. I'm sorry if I did, but I want to give credit where credit is due. And let me get back to sharing my screen here. And on honestly, in all honesty, I think this is probably one of the silliest things to come out of this whole thing. It is people taking sides on this. But as scientist Mel points out, is that the freedom of speech is not the freedom from consequences of it. We all stand, unfortunately, in Sarah Huckabee Sanders' case, is that it is often the position of her boss, her employer, the White House, the president. That is not. It is not to. It's not necessarily her free speech that's being challenged here. It's the speech that she has to give as part of her job. Now she can easily say, "No, I'm not going to say this," but then she'll be out of a job. I mean, it's a damned if you do, damned if you don't. But again, it's just one of those. It's one of those things where people don't understand or don't want to take the time to understand the difference between freedom of speech and I like to call it more freedom of ignorance. Um, People like to be ignorant. People like to think that they know all about their rights. They know the freedom of speech. They know the freedom of religion. They know the Second Amendment. Some know their Fifth Amendment right. But, again, a lot of them only know the surface. I don't even know a whole heck of a lot about them, but I at least try to read about it and understand it. And one of the first things that I've took when it comes to the freedom of speech is that yes, I have the freedom to say what I want on the internet. I also have to bear in mind the consequences of saying those things. My employer may not like what I say about things, whether it impacts my employer or not, but they still, but they are still able, um, they're still able to fire me for things for saying things that could impact the business. So that's kind of where it's kind of where we are at on this. Is is this business in the right to make their choice? Are they quote unquote infringing on anything that Sarah has said? No. Is booting Sarah out part of their freedom of speech? Yes. And they have to live with the consequences of booting out the press secretary. I don't think too much is going to come from this on her part, but there's going to be more to develop over the weekend. But as you can see under the picture, a not too flattering picture of Miss Huckabee Sanders, but it did not take long for before word got out the White House press secretary Sarah Huckabee Sanders was kicked out of a Virginia restaurant, or for people to hail her ejection as a brave move or denounce it as intolerance. And wow, that is just, yeah, it was just one of those things. Quote, I started serving I just served Sarah Sanders for a total of 2 minutes before my owner kicked her out along with her 7 of her other family members. End quote. Jake Foley Schwartz, the waiter at the Red Hen, wrote Friday evening on Facebook. Sanders confirmed the incident in a tweet on Saturday morning. Actually, I'm going to pull up that tweet right now. Let's see if it'll pull it up here. Let's see if it'll show me. Just a second. I want to see that it's showing this. Still playing. Still trying to understand all of how how it all works here. So here's Sarah Huckabee Sanders' tweet. Last night I was told by the owner of the Red Hen in Lexington, Virginia to leave because I work for the POTUS, and I politely left. Her actions say far more about her than about me. I always do my best to treat people, including those I disagree with, respectfully and will continue to do so. Honestly, there is nothing wrong with that tweet if you are from the progressive left or even the liberal left like I am. She's just saying, yes, I was there. Yes, I was asked to leave, and I politely left. And as far as I know, nobody's come out saying that she threw a fit or anything like that when she left. I could be wrong, but again, I just don't, and I just don't know for sure. Last night, and again, it's quoting the tweet. Soon after, Stephanie Wilkinson, the owner of the Red Hen, told the Washington Post her reason for booting the press secretary out of her restaurant. And I will try to remember to link to that here in a minute. I explained that the restaurant, quote, I explained that the restaurant has certain standards that I feel it has to uphold, such as honesty and compassion and cooperation, quote, she said. Quote, I would have done the same thing again. We just felt that there are moments in time when people need to live their convictions. This appeared to be one of them, end quote. Many people have defended Wilkinson's action on social media. The incident was trending on Twitter, and people left comments on the Red Hen's Yelp page and Facebook pages thanking the restaurant for standing up for Sanders, who has defended President Trump and his controversial policies, including the one that before Wednesday separated about 2,300 children from their parents who allegedly crossed the border illegally. Now, I like the tongue, the not the tongue, the parlance they use here, the wording that they use here in this article. That is Trump and his controversial policies, including this one that separated it. Again, the policy itself, again, from my understanding, and I'm trying to dig through all the history on it. I haven't quite finished it yet. Is that it goes back 20 years. So, if not a little bit more. So, 2 decades where this policy has been in effect. And it is only now an issue when President Trump and his administration is using it. And again, they use who allegedly crossed the border illegally. Allegedly. There is no reason to detain anybody who's crossing the border legally. There's no reason to. If they're crossing the border legally, they are not putting up any struggle or any fight, then what is the point? Why would Border Patrol do this? Oh, that's right. Border Patrol would do this because they're all a bunch of neo-Nazis that are white supremacists, white nationalists, blah, blah, blah. No, they're not. I cannot say that all of them are not, but I can definitely say not all of them are. And here's the thing about that is the progressive left, the radical progressive left, is giving a bad name for things such as freedom of speech. They're giving a bad name to the freedoms, the liberties that we all enjoy because they don't necessarily want those. They want them to be for them exclusively when they want to apply them for themselves. They just want They wanna create a thought police. They wanna if you even think something that might be considered hate speech, then you're guilty of hate speech and hate crimes, and it wouldn't even matter. Like, the other day, I overheard people complaining about tattoos on people. Some people said that they're ugly, other people say that they depending on who they are, that they can spread hateful messages. Sure, nothing says you have to associate with people that have offensive tattoos. Nothing says you even have to talk to them. But if you're offended by it, oh well. Your rights to freedom of speech do not protect you from the right to be offended. There is no constitutional right for you to be protected from being offended. Offense is never given. Offense is only taken. Dave likes to say that quite a bit. One of the tweets here is Bearded Ebenezer at PressSec. It does say more about the owner of the Red Hen, that they have morals and are outraged by your complicity in lying to Americans about that policy you, quote, didn't have, end quote, to separate families. So it's tweets like that just are going to drive me nuts. Another one, Paul Rudnick. Sarah Huckabee Sanders has fought gay marriage, gays in the military, and she agreed with her dad when he calls gays subhuman. She should get used to being denied entry at nice places like restaurants, democracies, and heaven. Hashtag Sarah Sanders. These people. I like how these people are exercising their right to free speech, but yet don't want to. I could probably see that they don't want to defend it necessarily the way that other people will. Sarah Reese Jones at Politicus Sarah. I'm sure that's supposed to be Politica U.S. Sarah. Hashtag Sarah Sanders is using her power as press secretary from the most powerful bully pulpit in the world to harm a business for not wanting to serve her as she defends the kidnapping and caging of babies. But yeah, she's the victim here, like always. Okay. That is not entirely true. All right. Wilkinson's actions, however, did not come without controversy. Some people call Wilkinson petty and said that her actions demonstrated intolerance for different points of view. Sanders' father and former Arkansas Governor Mike Huckabee chimed in on Twitter calling it bigotry. I'm not going to really care about that, but if it comes up in the article, we'll discuss it. But the Red Hen at Red Hen DC, good morning. At press secretary went to an unaffiliated at Red Hen Lex last night, not at our DC based restaurant. And then now comes the support for the press secretary. Would you serve her? Lisa Marie Martin, 4510. Okay. Excuse me. Sorry. Would you serve her? I would sure hope so. Tolerance for different views has been a strength of the left, but wow, am I seeing that change dramatically lately. It is sad and embarrassing. It's petty. It doesn't do anything positive to solve problems. Five Rights, at Five Rights, who's Philip Schuyler. Sarah Sanders, the owner of the Red Hat restaurant in Virginia, showed no sense of human decency, no inclination to treat people as equals entitled to their own opinions. Dems have a lot of trouble with that concept because they hate more blindly and hotly than any racist. TDS is real. Again, it's just more people arguing this point. Sanders is far from the only Trump official who has been called out in public for the administration policies. On Tuesday evening, protesters flooded a Mexican restaurant in Washington, shouting shame and end family separation at the Department of Homeland Security Secretary Kirstjen Nielsen as she tried to eat a meal. It took only 10 minutes before Nielsen, who became another recognizable face while defending Trump's tough immigration policies, again, Trump's immigration policies, decided to leave the restaurant. At one point, the video posted by the Metro DC Democrat Socialists of America, Nielsen appears to be avoiding protesters by lowering her head and typing on a cell phone as the crowd swarms her near her table, chanting, "If kids can't eat in peace, you can't eat in peace." And while we're on the subject of protesting, seriously, like seriously, interrupting somebody while they're having a meal at a restaurant, that that does not bode well for the protesters, in my view. Their right to do it. It's their right to do it. But also be aware that all it would take is for her to call the cops on you and have you arrested for harassment. You know, these people are working to try and do stuff for our government. You may not like it. You don't have to agree with it. You can protest it all you want. But just know that your protests also have limits. Your protests have limits on what you constitutionally can get away with. And when you are harassing somebody, whether they are a part of the government or not, if they are on their own time, they have a right to privacy. They have a right to not be harassed just as much as you or I do. Yes, they are quote unquote public figures, but they also have a right to privacy just the same as you and I do. Trump may be wildly popular in some parts of the country, but for some staffers, at least young ones serving this administration, presents another challenge: the dating scene. Oh, God. I really should have read this article a little bit better. According to Politico, some young professionals faced hostility when out on dates or socializing with people after revealing they work for the Trump administration. Oh, God. And then that ends my access to the story because I'm not going to pay for it. But still, it is one of the this is easily one of the wildest political stories that doesn't need to be a political story. I mean, come on, people. Like I said, the business owner is well within her rights, and I don't deny that. I don't want to defend it either because I really don't have an opinion on this. She has the right to ask her to leave. That's their choice. You politely left. As far as I can tell, no incident has been claimed. But yet, but yet, we have to talk about this as if she is some sort of felon, as if she's some sort of criminal who doesn't deserve these things. Now, getting to what I was talking about earlier on here about Scientist Mel. I actually found out about Scientist Mel from SciStrike, his movie night, and his also Science Sundays, which have gone to Mondays, or it's a confusing schedule. I found her YouTube channel, I found her Twitter feed, and I find that she's pretty well reasoned, pretty level headed on things. So I thought I would share her tweet as well as her piece that she wrote about. So here we go. Hi, at Press Secretary. I have heard hashtag Red Hen Lexington has turned you away from patronizing their establishment. Free speech does not mean freedom of consequences. I wrote a piece on this, and there's the link. Now, just reading this tweet, I still cannot figure out if she truly is saying that it's an issue for the press secretary, for Sarah Huckabee Sanders, or if it's actually an issue for the establishment. That's for her to decide. I'm not going to go reading through all of the different how do I want to put it, replies and whatnot. I'm looking at them right now. With bakers being legally allowed not to bake cakes for gay couples for personal reasons, it isn't a far stretch to assume that any establishment can and will deny services to anyone whom they do not share particular perspective, i.e., you, at Press Secretary. This is your administration. At Press Secretary, you're the voice, and I'm not trying to. Before I go on here, I'm not trying to put words into Scientist Mel's mouth, and I'm not trying to twist anything here. I'm just reading them as she's put them out there. At Press Secretary, you are the voice of at real Donald Trump. You represent him. You speak for him. It's widely known and regularly proven how reality contradicts what comes from your podium every day. Freedom of speech does not mean freedom of consequences. This is your administration. Your job, your words, your voice, your choice. Choose wisely. And with that, Mel, kudos. You can't see it but I'm doing a thumbs up. Um, I th- I think you have hit the nail on the head. And now that I'm reading this, I now know that what your tweet was meaning was directly at the press secretary. However, I also think that it also goes the other way. Mel, I'm not trying to have an argument or anything, but I also think that it goes the same way um, for the red hen. They have now done something that, while they have legal precedents to do, and they have every right to do, in my opinion, as well as I'm assuming yours, they now have to deal with the consequences of what can happen to that. The lack of business coming in. They may have had loyal customers that were, um, they may have had loyal customers that were um, Republican leaning, conservative leaning, and that is now a possibility of business they're going to lose. Again, Mel, I'm not trying to attack you. I actually have the utmost respect for you. But I think your tweet cuts both ways. You can correct me if I'm wrong. Comment down below, Scientist Mel, by all means. But I really think that this business has to be aware of what they are doing. Is the same thing as what you're is the same thing of what you're saying the White House is doing. So now I don't pretend to know how much you know about the law. I'm not a lawyer, and I don't pretend to be one. I don't I don't pretend to even know half of what you know in science. So again, this is all coming out wrong on my part. I'm just trying to. I'm using your stuff because it spoke to me. It told me what I wanted to hear and how it can apply to both sides. So let me go back here and go to your blog post. And I have linked both your tweet and your blog post in my comments. So please don't copyright strike me. I'm just sharing what I think to be relevant. I even retweeted your tweet today at my personal handle. So, but your post from August 9th, 2017, freedom of speech, clarifications, cautions, public opinion, and why it's valuable to listen to problematic speech. And I really really thank you for this blog post. I would even love to sit down with you, Mel, and actually just have just a general discussion. No debate, no arguments or anything. Just a general discussion on politics. I think we probably have some overlap, but not a lot. Like I said, I tend to be a little more. I don't know if you watch any of my other stuff, but I tend to be a little bit more left libertarian, like left centrist area. I, but at the same time, I think what you have here, and I'm not going to read the whole thing. I'm just going to go through kind of the key points that I think are here, and that is opening paragraph actually is important. Technology and social media have given many groups outlets to freely express their ideals and perspectives. This is a good thing in that people can engage in open discussions in order to understand the perspectives of people not like them. Freedom of speech is important so that people not only can express their thoughts openly, but also be challenged to defend their thoughts as well as potentially learn from others. This is where I think social media's greatest failing is. We, and I'm including myself in this. We all have a social sphere, a bubble on social media. I have a good mixture of progressives, liberals, conservatives, libertarians, and the like in my sphere. So I don't think it's so much of an echo chamber for me. However, I can understand how I can influence my social sphere to have that echo chamber. I don't know if that's necessarily what you were going for on this blog post, Mel, but I that's kind of how I'm reading into it. Is that we have the media, we have the technology, we have the access to do this, but it's not, and it's a good thing for us to have it because we can have those open discussions. We can talk to each other. We can disagree, and we should be able to disagree and have a conversation, not just blatant butting of heads. So, speech and communication are powerful tools we use to relay not only our thoughts and opinions, but engage with others. Many use these tools to persuade others to see their point of view, switch sides, spread propaganda, push agendas, encourage hate, marginalize specific groups, and some negative motives. Agreed. People are entitled to speak freely without fear of prison. Why? Because people should be able to say words, if for nothing else, to allow others to engage and correct wrong information. Agreed. I mean, I I have no other words to say to this because what you're saying is really what I truly believe. Oftentimes, we see outrage in social media, Twitter, Facebook, and the like when certain accounts get suspended. We we read posts stating it impedes their right to freedom of speech, and Twitter and Facebook are not free assembly spaces that law protects. Spaces the law protects. And I used to be in that camp. I used to be, how dare they impede their freedom of speech? How dare they prevent them from spreading their voice? Even initially, just kind of backtracking a year or two, with Colin Kaepernick. Initially, I was like, "Oh, they're," as a veteran, I personally don't care whether he stands or kneels. I defended his right to do that thing as a military service member. However, I feel like the owners are infringing upon their right to protest. But as I studied the freedom of speech laws, as I studied more and more about it, I've understood that there is a balance between what the government does, what I can do, and what my employer can ask of me. I do this podcast for myself. I do it to get my opinion out there. But at the same time, I have to be cautious of how I approach things. I have incidences on a daily and sometimes weekly basis where I want to just hop on YouTube, hop onto the podcast99.org and just call people out for what I think they are. But at the same time, if I were to do that, especially when it's related to me on the job, I could lose my job over that. And I understand that. Now, that's not to that's not to say that I can't have these thoughts. It's not to say that I can't, in a low key group, talk about this with people. But at the same time, I'm not going to go out of my way to do that because it would cost me my job. So again, I understand where the NFL owners are coming from. I understand where in this case the Red Hand Lexington, a non-affiliate of another restaurant, is well within their rights to do it. They're representing themselves as a company. So, that little restaurant. I don't know how little it is, but um, Twitter is the world's cafe or pub where people can go to hang out, interact. If you cause a disturbance in this privately owned cafe, you are asked to leave. It's not impeding your right to freedom of speech or free speech. It's the owner saying that you are upsetting everyone else and you need to leave. And I agree with that. I mean, there are people who get their accounts targeted all the time. There are people who get their accounts flagged, looking for the right word here, flagged for engaging in discourse. But the point is we should be able to have civil discourse without people getting overly offended and overly upset. For example, I know Sargon of Akkad had his main Twitter account shut down because of what people have deemed to be harassment. I wouldn't necessarily call it that, but it is what it is. Let's see here. This example can also be seen in regards to discriminatory practices that gave rise to the civil rights movement. Notice the protests were not in diners or cafes of people who did not want the protests there. They were in public assembly of government-regulated streets of towns and privately owned businesses. People have the right to speak out against what they feel is wrong without fear of prison in government-regulated areas. And that's kind of where I do kind of have to backtrack a little bit. She is sitting when we're talking about the Secretary of Homeland Security sitting outside at a restaurant. If the people are on the public street, technically they're within the right to protest her. I would feel harassed if I was in her position, and I may at least call for some sort of security to allow me to leave the place with the minimal amount of harassment following. However, again, I still stand by my belief that people, if they are off duty in their jobs, and I know some of these jobs are quote unquote 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and I know you can't see me doing the air quotes, but they are still entitled to their private life without being harassed. But again, I agree. They should not fear to go to jail. They should not fear to protest and speak out on what they feel is wrong. But they also have to understand that they also have consequences as well to follow up that could follow up on them. For example, if I were to do something like that and it was my employer found out, I could lose my job. All I have to do is say, you are not following in what our company believes to be the best interest of the company, and gone. And you discussed that later on here, Mel. I'm trying not to jump too far ahead, but it is what it is. All right. XKCD gives short and well said comment addressing free speech and that it is not consequence free. Your words, as long as they are not a threat of violence or harm to others, are protected to prevent you from going to jail. Your words your words are still yours and do not protect you from the court of public opinion. What does this court of public opinion mean exactly? And she gives a whole list of things, and one of them being exactly the Colin Kaepernick issue, the Google manifesto, um, Phil Robertson's from Duck Dynasty. I mean, these are these are all fine things, and as you got highlighted, as I highlighted here, if an employer fires you for your words because they feel you've caused damage to their company, this is not impeding your right to free speech. You're not going to jail for your words. That's exactly right. There's there is a line that every employer has. And if you are going to express yourself, no matter what those expressions are, there are consequences. Again, doing this, and I'm going to stop sharing for a second. Again, doing this, what I do here, my company could, if they ever found me to say something that they do not agree with as grounds for termination. And that is something I have to accept as an acceptable risk or not. If I did not think that my opinion mattered that much, I wouldn't do this. But at the same time, I have the right to express myself, just not consequence free. And the images you use so eloquently in here, um, and you talk about your personal running into people on Twitter, asking you their opinion, etc. And while I'm not to the level of followers you are, I'm not to the level of followers on Twitter, YouTube, Facebook, or anything like that. I do find that if I say stuff to, like, just for an example, on my personal Facebook feed, if I say anything that to my friends that are conservative, that they don't like, friends or family, they let me know. And try to politely tell them why I think why I disagree with them. But they have their snide comments, their de- degrading terminology for me. However, I will politely tell them, all right, I'm done with this, and I will block any notifications from that thread. I won't block them or mute them until they actually threaten harm to me. And the same goes for my progressive left friends, the ones that would be right in line with Antifa and the like. Maybe not all of them. I won't include all of them in the Antifa type of group, but they have some of them have all said to one point or another, it's okay to punch Nazis in the face because they're Nazis. And I don't think that they think about that because if they were to think about that, that would mean I would have to get punched in the face because I don't agree with a lot of what they say. But at the same time, we just have to politely try to move on. So that's what it is. Uh, from Mel's blog post here, I don't truly expect every person who behaves this way to learn why it's problematic. Discussing why people who um, loss of words here, because I'm not one sharing the screen anymore, but two, off I often get berated for not engaging. Sometimes I get told I'm not a scientist because I'm not engaging or responding to people who are emotionally charged and offended. I won't listen to them as I've lost the conversation due to circular arguments. And again, this is kind of where I agree. I don't I don't think people understand that just because you're talking to me or talking to anybody on Twitter, YouTube, Facebook, G plus, any social media page, it's how do I want to put it? They don't understand that even when you try to explain to them that, hey, I am I have had my conversation with you. We are just running in circles. It's over. It it it, it causes it can cause issues. Now, sometimes we need to stop and take a look and be like, hey, is there something we aren't learning from those people? And I know that's what Mel's trying to say here. Is it's not just one sided that one person has to learn. They might the other side might present me with a fact or a piece of information that I might not know about. And so I need to do that. Um, Mel's words again. I'm a scientist and inherently curious of just about everything. It fascinates me that people ignore evidence and spout whatever they wish, thinking there is no consequence for what they say due to their misunderstanding of their quote right to free speech end quote. As a scientist and a former educator, I feel it is important that I listen slash read, not to respond per se, but to understand. Kind of what I was just saying there. I want to know why people think and feel the way they do, say slash quoting misguided false slash false information as factual. There's a danger to sitting back silently as numbers grow and pushing false information as fact, degrading integrity of the effective problem-solving process. Louder voices promoting false information can gain a strong hold on society. One should also take note of not, quote, giving a voice, quote, to those who work to use your platform as a soapbox and grandstand. It requires caution and calm as well as knowing when to walk away. Another reason why Twitter bans certain individuals as they become abusive and harmful to others quickly. Uh, I suggest that you read this. I'm going to read her conclusion here. In conclusion, speaking as a scientist, we cannot truly learn if we do not take in information of every aspect of a topic. Problematic speech and unfounded claims need to be understood in regards as to why it is being said. It also needs to be equally addressed with sustainable evidence presented in a respectful way as the court of public opinion matters. It does not need to be addressed every time, but when it is addressed, use it as a moment to learn why someone is saying the words and to teach others the correct information. Silence is not often effective in teaching, and it is powerful when implemented. Know when to use it. Thank you for reading Scientist Mel. Again, this is not I'm not trying to argue against Scientist Mel. I wholly agree with her on this. There are little things that there is um, there are some things that her and I might not necessarily agree on, but on the whole, on this particular topic, the freedom of speech and the fact that there is consequences to it that we, the speakers of our words, have to learn to live by, uh, is important. It's one of those things that we have to think about. All right, and one last thing that I wanted to share, since I have the time, and I think it's important. Again, it's the whole thing. I think the whole premise of having to talk about this is on the whole foolish. I think it is. We should know what the freedom of speech is and when it not when it applies, because it applies everywhere. But who cannot actually limit our free speech? And that is the government. Businesses have the right to have the right to invoke their policies, and they have the right to choose when to not allow customers in their business. That is fine. But at the same time, the business better be prepared to handle any backlash that they will receive. Hence why the Red Hen DC came out and said this is not an affiliate with us, you know. So Stephanie Wilkinson was at home Friday evening, nearly 200 miles from the White House, when the choice presented itself. Her phone rang about 8 p.m. The chef at the Red Hen, a tiny farm-to-table restaurant that she co-owned just off of Main Street in a small city in the western part of the state. Sarah Huckabee Sanders had just walked in and sat down, the chef informed her. Said the staff was a little concerned. What should we do? Wilkinson told the Washington Post. I said, quote, I said I would be down to see if it's true, end quote. It seemed unlikely to her that President Trump's press secretary should be dining at a 26-seat restaurant in rural Virginia, but then it was unlikely to see her entire staff would have missed it. But then it would, wow, I can't speak. But then it was unlikely that her entire staff would have misidentified Sanders, who had arrived last to the table of 8 booked under her husband's name. All right. She made the short drive to the Red Hen. Wilkinson knew only this. She knew Lexington has a population of 7,000 and voted overwhelmingly against Trump in a county that voted overwhelmingly for him. She knew the community was deeply divided over such issues as Confederate flags. She knew, she said, that her restaurant and its half-dozen servers, cooks, had managed to stay in business for 10 years by keeping politics off the menu. Totally agree with that. I mean, even in my line of work, I would love to talk politics with my customers, but I know I can't. If they broach the subject with me, I will be as candid as the situation dictates, but I often don't express my own views. I will hear them out, and whether I believe the same thing as them or not, I might challenge their point of view on it. Be like, "Well, have you thought about this particular point of it?" etc. You know, such as with the Colorado baker in the Supreme Court case. And she believed that Sarah Huckabee Sanders worked in service of an inhumane, unethical administration. I'm not a huge fan of confrontation, Wilkinson said. I have a business and I want that business to thrive. This feels like the moment in our democracy when people have to make uncomfortable actions and decisions to uphold their morals. Totally fine with that, Miss Wilkinson. Totally agree with you. When she walked in the restaurant, Wilkinson saw that there had been no mistake. The Red Hen is no bigger than some apartments, and the group table was impossible to miss. Sanders in her black dress, her husband, 3 or 4 men and women roughly similar ages, and an older couple. They had cheese boards in front of them, Wilkinson said, like any other family. The kitchen had already prepped the party's main course, was already preparing the party's main course. Wilkinson interrupted to huddle with her workers. Several of the Red Hen employees are gay, she said. They knew Sanders had defended Trump's desire to bar transgender people from the military, and this month they had all watched her evade questions and defend Trump's policy. Again, I need to do some more research, but the wording like this is why the bias in the media is just so frustrating. And then she, quote, tell me what you want me to do. I can ask her to leave, end quote. Wilkinson told her staff. She said, quote, they said yes, end quote. And it's important to Wilkerson, she said, that Sanders had already been served and that her staff had not simply refused her on site. It was important to her that Sanders, as a public official, was not just a customer with whom she disagreed, many of whom were included in her regular clientele. All the same, she was tense as she walked up to the press secretary's chair and, quote, I said, I'm the owner. end quote, she recalled. Quote, I'd like you to come out to the patio with me for a word. They stepped outside into a small enclosure, but at least out of the crowded restaurant. Quote, I was babbling like a little, but I got my point across in a polite and direct fashion, end quote. Ms. Wilkinson said, quote, I explained that the restaurant has certain standards that I feel it has to uphold, such as honesty, compassion, and cooperation. I said that I'd like to ask you to leave. Wilkinson did not know how Sanders would react or whether Trump's chief spokeswoman had been called out in a restaurant before, as the president's Homeland Security Secretary had been days earlier. Sanders' response was immediate. Wilkinson said, quote, that's fine. I'll go. Sanders went back to the table, picked up her things, and walked out. The others at her table had been welcome to stay, Wilkinson said, but they didn't. So the servers cleared away the cheese plates and glasses. They offered to pay, Wilkinson said, and I said, no, it's on the house. At the end of the shift, Wilkinson said the staff members left the usual overnight note in the kitchen for the morning manager, a problem with the credit card machine, restock vodka, tequila. If you've ever heard the term 286, someone comes from the restaurant industry, code to refuse service, or alternatively to take an item off the menu. 86, Sarah Huckabee Sanders, the note read. Below the reminder to buy more Pellegrino. It is one of those things. It is one of those things, like right here, even in this news story, and I know I'm running up against time here, but in this news story, you can clearly see that the press secretary was polite, even offered to pay, or at least her party offered to pay, and the owner was polite, no, I asked you to leave, it's on us, that is fine. That right there is how discourse needs to happen. That's how effective freedom of speech works. Now, yes, I don't agree with them tweeting out the image 86 Sarah Huckabee Sanders. That should be internal. And that should be, I hope whoever tweeted that out at least gets a talking to from Miss Wilkinson. But that's just my opinion. They are entitled to do that, but not without consequence. So with that, in closing, I'd just like to say, I know I like to do a couple different topics on here, but I felt that this had to be addressed. Freedom of speech is not just for who we want, is not just for who we feel should have it. It is for everybody. But we have to learn to live with the consequences that come from that. Again, like I said, I hope that the actual hotel employee that tweeted out that image showing 86 Sarah Huckabee Sanders does get at least a verbal warning. I mean, I'm not asking a whole lot, but there needs to be consequences for that. Because you stated in this article that you wanted to keep politics off the menu, and that's what you need to do. Yes, it's one thing to address the situation that happened in your restaurant, but it's an entirely another thing to allow your employees to discuss it, or to do that, to post a picture of it. Anyways, this is Jay with This Week in News Politics, episode number 18. You can contact me at jpoliticspodcast@gmail.com or at jpoliticspodcast on Twitter. Thank you again for listening. Check us out on podcastnetwork.org. And have a great weekend. Enjoy your summer vacation if you are on vacation. I hope you enjoy whatever trip. Speaking of trips, if you are planning a trip in the future for the next summer, check out with a travel agent. A lot of places that you book your travel through actually would pay travel agent commission that you do not pay extra for. Just a little tip. Hope you folks have a wonderful day.